back to Spectator Sports, where we cover sports from a spectator's point of view. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 131. We are back after a little break from the Super Bowl, and we have so much to break down with the NBA and also the NFL with the offseason rolling around with the new league year coming up in a couple weeks. But before we get into this week's episode, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you're new to Spectator Sports and you want to help this channel grow, reach a broader audience, we're going to need your help. We are on the grind to 300 subscribers, and it looks like we're going to hit that goal well before the NBA Finals. So we're going to move up this goal to the start of the NBA playoffs in April. So if you could do a massive favor, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to enjoy more Spectator Sports content in clips form, well, we got that for you here in YouTube in our various playlists, as well as on TikTok for now. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio perspective, we got that for you on Spotify. I'll link everything in the description. And let's get into this week's episode. It's official. The Philadelphia 76ers are shutting down Joel Embiid for the remainder of the season. And this is due to various ailments in his troublesome left knee. At this point, between this and the Paul George drama, which we'll get into a little bit later, this season has been doomed from the start. And what I mean by that, Joel Embiid had various problems in his entire NBA career, but going back to last year where he was teetering on an MVP level pace where he was leading the league in scoring, he could have maybe won another MVP award, but while going for a loose ball, Joel Embiid got caught up in a pile where Jonathan Kuminga was going for the ball as well and somehow landed on Embiid's left knee. And since then, Embiid hasn't been the same. He didn't suit up for 2+ months at the tail end of the 2024 season, came back in the early part of April for the remainder of the regular season, and then played a hobbled series against the New York Knicks where the Sixers gave the Knicks a little bit of a scare, but ended up losing the series in 6 games. But this was a step in the right direction. Tyrese Maxey made strides that we didn't expect him to make this early in his career. He made his first All-Star game and had a fantastic series when most of the time Joel Embiid didn't seem like himself with the various ailments in his knee and also battling Bell's palsy. In the offseason, they brought in Paul George, and now the expectations are heightened. The Philadelphia 76ers should have championship aspirations coming into the 2024-2025 season. But since the offseason has come and gone, well, the Sixers have looked quite different, and really it comes down to the health and availability of their 2 biggest superstars. Starting off with Joel Embiid, well, he decided to embark on the Paris Olympics with Team USA. And there's nothing wrong with that. Getting an Olympic gold medal is something that is rare, and usually it is a great honor to represent your country. Now, Joel has had citizenships with his native country of Cameroon and also was eligible to play for Team France, but elected to play with Team USA, and this definitely rubbed people the wrong way, especially the host nation France, as the Olympics was played in Paris. After being part of a rotation where he wasn't really a consistent contributor, where he did start a few games but ended up missing an entire game in group play, Joel Embiid still managed to win his Olympic gold medal, but remember, he still had that knee injury bothering him from February. He admittedly did say that his knee didn't completely heal, and he was going to take the remainder of the offseason to rest up for the upcoming season in the fall. However, coming into training camp, reports were saying that the knee wasn't as great as we initially expected, and he was going to miss the beginning part of the season. It ended up being 9 games, and he himself stated that he would no longer play in back-to-backs for the remainder of his career. And this already puts a damper on a season where many people had big expectations for the Philadelphia 76ers, but yet again, Joel Embiid suffers another injury, and these effects lingered throughout the entirety of the season. We only saw him suit up for 19 games this season. Whether at some point the knee never was 100%, he struggled to get onto the court, and when he was on the court, he wasn't at his best. You could definitely see that this wasn't the Joel Embiid that we're used to seeing, especially the MVP caliber player that we're used to seeing, especially in recent years with the Philadelphia 76ers. And health has been a big problem for this edition of the 76ers, where Paul George has also missed time due to a hyperextended knee and a bone bruise. Also had injuries to Tyrese Maxey. And the list goes on where their big three only suited up for 15 games so far this season, and they unfortunately only had a record of 7-8. And that's simply due to the lack of chemistry when you have players missing time in training camp and then they're missing time in the regular season. They're probably not practicing as well. The efforts show it. The Sixers at this point stand at 20-38, and they're riding a 9-game losing streak. They haven't won a game since the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl on February 9th. And during this recent string of poor play for the Sixers, especially in February, the final straw was when Embiid was getting torched by Nick Claxton of the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets have also been a team that haven't been that great. I mean, they traded their last remaining star, Mikal Bridges, over to the New York Knicks, and this was a year that they were looking to rebuild and hope that the ping pong balls are in their favor, that they can maybe dip into the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. But in this game against the Philadelphia 76ers, Nick Claxton went to town on Joel Embiid, where he torched the former MVP center time in and time out, to the point where Joel Embiid was benched in the fourth quarter and did not step on the court for the rest of the game, as the Sixers lost yet another game, and this time to a team that's trying to lose games in efforts to try and get Cooper Flag in this year's draft. With Joel Embiid being shut down for the remainder of the season, that means he's going to miss 63 games. And then when you pile it in with the last set of games that he missed, he only played in 39 games last season and then 19 games this year. That's a combined of 58 games over 2 seasons, where at this point he's a part-time player. I mean, he's playing in less than 33% of his games. And so far in his 11-year career, in 876 eligible games, he's only suited up for 452. That's only been 52% of possible games. It's just not going to get it done when you're a superstar player, a franchise cornerstone that the Philadelphia 76ers are depending on you to be there consistently and hopefully be a championship contender. But yet again, health is the problem with Joel Embiid. And for whatever reason, we knew that as a bigger player, he was going to have injury problems. I mean, in fact, when he started in the league, he missed his first 2 years in the NBA. He was drafted in 2014, did not suit up until the fall of 2016, missing 2 seasons with foot and back injuries. Since then, I mean, I can't remember a time where he's even broken the 70-game mark in an entire regular season. We know this with Joel Embiid. There's always going to be something, whether it's a foot, whether it's a knee. Recently, we've been seeing facial fractures to his face where he has to don a mask. There's always something with Joel Embiid. And you can say it's bad luck, it's not his fault. But why do these consistently happen to the same player? I mean, after a while, these have to start accumulating to the fact that conditioning is part of the factor here, and then also just him not being durable. I mean, he's just very brittle at this point. And remember, when he started this season, he re-signed with the Philadelphia 76ers to basically add on 3 years, $193 million that keep him with the Sixers until 2029. And at this point, the Sixers aren't getting their money's worth because he's only shooting up for less than a third of the season's games, especially the last 2 years. When he's there, you just don't know how long he's going to be there. He's not a max player. He's not going to be there consistently. This is arguably one of the worst contracts in sports. And while that contract might be the worst in sports, let's turn our attention to Podcast P, Joel Embiid's co-star with the Philadelphia 76ers, because ever since joining Philadelphia last summer, Podcast P, or Paul George, as many people may know, hasn't been the same type of player that we're used to seeing him be. We know with the Los Angeles Clippers that Paul George maybe wasn't at his best, but still was a reputable player. He gave you 22, 23 points a game, pretty good defense, and was a capable shooter. But when it comes to the postseason, he's either hurt or it comes up very small. And this is when the Clippers were thinking, well, okay, we've already extended Kawhi Leonard and we know that he has injury problems, but we know that there's something there. Well, what has Paul George given you in this entire career? He has 2 conference finals appearances to his name. And like I said, he comes up small routinely in the postseason. And he's not the most durable player himself. He missed quite a deal of time when he was playing for the LA Clippers. Somehow, when he became available in free agency last offseason, the Clippers let him walk. Maybe that was the wiser thing to do because the Sixers took the bait. They gave him 4 years, $212 million. And what has he given you? He's giving you a ton of podcasts, as we know. I mean, this guy at one point had more podcasts published than field goals made in his Sixers career. And so far, 16 points a game, just looking like a shell of himself. Yes, he started off the year off on a bad note with a hyperextended knee and a bone bruise, but after a while, he did play in back-to-backs. He was available, but the play hasn't been up to standards of what his contract is reflecting at this point for the Philadelphia 76ers. But the fact is, when this man is an NBA athlete, but he has a ton of podcasts being posted, he definitely shows that he's unfocused and unserious. It comes down to the point where just recently this week, he finally decided to pause posting episodes for the podcast P on YouTube. But the reasons are really confusing because at this point, he's saying that he's pausing it to focus on a playoff run, the championships that he wanted to bring Philadelphia. Well, where was this before? Because at the start of the season, you had so many aspirations, and I understand you were hurt. But despite that, as soon as a game is done, you can expect the podcast from Podcast B to be out by the next morning. And for that level of lack of commitment to your teammates, the organization, the fans, is just exactly why viewership and ratings have been down this year. I talked about it, how it just seems like players don't seem committed to their craft. They don't seem to be giving the fans who spend their hard-earned money, whether it's through merchandise or showing up to the games or buying league pass, that they don't seem to reward these type of fans that are just so dedicated to their team. And at this point, it's gotten so bad that people are alienating themselves from Paul George. They think that this is a lost season. They're sick and tired of Paul George and his antics. And okay, you commit yourself and the Sixers go on a run. Well, at this point, you stand in 12th place in the Eastern Conference. You're behind teams that are still trying to tank for Cooper Flag. And you're still on the outside looking in the play-in tournament. And even if you do make the play-in tournament, you're not that big of a threat. It's a do-or-die tournament. A single loss puts you out of the equation, and then you're having fewer ping pong balls. And I think in the whole grand scheme of things for the Philadelphia 76ers, there's only one way to make this somewhat of a salvageable season. Tank the rest of the season. Shut down Paul George. You already shut down Joel Embiid. Hell, they even shut down Tyrese Maxey at this point. He is the future of this franchise because we know Joel at this point is unreliable. He's only getting older. Paul George has already shown that he's washed. Build around Tyrese Maxey. Jared McCain will be back next year. And pray that the ping pong balls land in your favor and you are able to keep your top 6 protected pick in this upcoming draft in June. And if you land that, you can do a couple of things. You can draft a young stud. This year's draft is supposed to have a lot of young talent. Or use it as a trade piece to either offload Paul George's contract or find a way to acquire another superstar to hopefully salvage this very sad era in Philadelphia basketball. Regardless, to keep it simple, The process era in Sixers basketball is a massive failure. You have 0 conference finals appearances dating back to the Allen Iverson days. The players that were drafted during that era were either busts or players that were not serious about basketball. The star players that you acquire via trade or free agency have come and gone, whether it was Jimmy Butler or James Harden. And the one player that you do end up hitting on in the draft during this tanking era has been injured so frequently to the point we're questioning his future in the NBA. Comment what you think the Sixers should do, whether they should blow it all up, should they retool, or should they just simply run it back, hoping that all these players are healthy come next season? But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. The nightmare in Dallas keeps getting worse. And for the Dallas Mavericks, they got the worst news possible after Kyrie Irving went down with a knee injury. He was going to the basket on a layup attempt, and his knee just bent the wrong way. I honestly thought it was a hyperextended knee, which something that you can come back. It just means that he's going to miss maybe a couple of weeks. But unfortunately, MRIs came back on Tuesday that Kyrie Irving did indeed tear his ACL and is going to be out for not just the remainder of this season, but a huge chunk of next season. And I mean, credit to Kyrie. I mean, this guy has been so tough in terms of carrying the Mavs ever since Anthony Davis went down halfway into his season debut. He was playing 39 minutes a game, could have been even 40 at times, and I know that he's been carrying the load, but these accumulation of minutes or the heavier workload is not something that attributed to this knee injury in particular. It's just a freak accident and couldn't come at a worst possible time for not just Kyrie, but also the Dallas Mavericks. He did make a valiant effort to hobble to the free throw line, make the 2 free throws in something that the late, great Kobe Bryant did when he tore his Achilles. And now it's just a long road to recovery for Kyrie Irving. This is a guard that depends on his shiftiness, his ball handling ability, his quickness, and the explosiveness to get to the rim particularly. And obviously, an ACL injury is something that you can come back from. It's not quite as devastating as in years past, but the fact that it's coming so late in this season means that he will be missing a large portion of next season. At this point, I'm just not sure what we're going to get out of Kyrie Irving post ACL surgery. And obviously wish him a speedy recovery, a healthy recovery. This was going to be a big offseason for Kyrie. If he was healthy, he could have absolutely commanded a lot more money if he chose to opt out of his current contract, which he was due $40 million for the upcoming season. But now with this uncertainty, I think it would be really smart for him to just opt in and just have the Mavs pay him to essentially rehab until he's ready to go sometime next year. Looking at what this means for the Dallas Mavericks, imagine last year in June, you are in the NBA Finals, you are obviously outmatched to an all-time great Boston Celtics team, but there's definitely some hope beyond the horizon. You have Luka Doncic, your generational talent. He's only age 25 at that point. He's coming off a great season, and you have Kyrie Irving as his backcourt mate. You have a good front line with Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. You have some good wings in PJ Washington, and at this point you're thinking just run it back, make some tweaks like they did with Klay Thompson. But once Nico Harrison got this terrible idea to offload Luka Doncic not only to just any team but the Los Angeles Lakers and bring in Anthony Davis, who we know, yes, he's a talented two-way player, but we know he's a guy that's always hurt. There's just always something wrong with Anthony Davis. He's just bound to get injured. And right on cue, in his season debut, 2.5 quarters into playing for the Dallas Mavericks, he re-aggravates his abdominal injury, and we haven't seen him since early February. I understand taking a swing, but this is simply GM malpractice. Nico Harrison's gamble has been a massive failure. Selling your franchise's long-term future for a short-term gamble never seemed to make sense, and we're seeing the Mavs pay a hefty price for this recent transaction. In this move, you're betting against the next decade of Luka Doncic's career, and you're hoping that in this 2 to 3 year window with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving that you win a championship. And you're already off to a terrible start. This year is gone. You can count it out at this point. But next year is also looking highly unlikely, because when was the last time that Anthony Davis has been able to play consistent injury-free basketball? It's been a long time. And for him to hold the fort down while Kyrie rehabs for much of this year, which will likely keep him out to around this time next season, just doesn't seem to bode well for next year. So that's out the window. And then this means that you're putting all your eggs in the 2026-2027 window to go all in at that point to hopefully make this deal somewhat redeemable. The Mavs' outlook doesn't look great. They have no draft capital outside of this year's upcoming draft, and this is only fueling the rumors I mentioned earlier about the Dallas Mavericks potentially alienating their fan base to relocate to Las Vegas. We know that the new ownership has big ties to casinos all throughout Nevada, and we know that the NBA is looking into extending and bringing in an NBA franchise to Sin City. But it's hard to do so when you have a lot of things going on. But the easiest option, instead of creating an expansion franchise, is simply have a team relocate. And at this point, Mavs fans are sick and tired of Nico Harrison and his management of their franchise in the Dallas Mavericks. We know that this move in particular has caused a lot of frustration with Mavs fans. They're coming into their stadium chanting "Fire Nico," bringing in signs and bringing in Luka Doncic gear and memorabilia, but now we're seeing that the Mavs franchise is simply alienating them. I mean, we're looking at them raising prices of season tickets by 8 to 10% next season. And for what is that? We already talked about how Kyrie's going to be missing most of the year, and Anthony Davis is likely to get banged up at some point next season. But like I said earlier, this trade is absolutely a disaster, and it's likely going to end up as one of the worst trades in NBA history, as I don't see any future for the Dallas Mavericks. There's no point trying for the play-in tournament. You're the 10 seed right now. Just simply tank the season. Your only way out of this to make it even somewhat redeemable is to get a draft pick that's usable and you can do something with it, because the Sixers are in a similar situation, and we already covered that as well. But if you want to take a look at that, I'll link it in the description. But for the Mavs, at this point, give Anthony Davis the full offseason. Shut him down for the remainder of the year. Let him come back and be healthy, ready to go for 2025, 2026. And hope that he can keep the team afloat while Kyrie recovers. But this window is going to be closing soon, and unless things go somewhat in a positive direction next season, I don't see how Nico Harrison can survive this. Between the Mavs fans rioting at each game and the health of the core group of players for the Dallas Mavericks in question, the Mavs' future looks incredibly bleak. And this is exactly why you don't trade Luka Doncic. The San Francisco 49ers trade Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders for a 5th round draft pick. This is mainly a deal to offload a huge chunk of Deebo Samuel's contract, as he's owed $18 million for this year. Obviously, we know about the 49ers contract situation with Brock Purdy, as this seems to be a move that they're trying to make to create some cap room to pay Brock Purdy, which looks like to be a massive deal coming up very shortly. This is sort of a win-win scenario. Like I said, the 49ers get to offload a huge chunk of Deebo's contract to a different team, and the Washington Commanders get another weapon for Jaden Daniels and only have to pay a 5th round draft pick. Obviously, the Commanders made this move to maximize their championship window under Jaden Daniels' rookie contract, as he's playing at an elite level for a very cheap price. But Looking at what they're getting with Deebo Samuel, well, if we saw this move in the 2022 offseason coming off of Deebo's All-Pro year where he had over 1,400 yards receiving and a good amount of rushing yards as he was kind of this hybrid running back, wide receiver type of role for the 49ers. Yeah, I think this would have been a great deal. This would have been a steal. But now looking after 3 seasons since that campaign, well, I don't think this is the same type of player. Deebo Samuel has absolutely regressed since that All-Pro season. In fact, he's failed to have 1,000 yards receiving since that 2021 first-team All-Pro season, and only the 2023 season was when he surpassed over 1,000 total scrimmage yards. A big factor into this is just his physical play. Deebo Samuel plays the position as physical as anybody in the NFL. He's a yak monster and still is very productive with yards after catch, but with the amount of touches he gets, especially after 2021, this definitely factored into several injuries that he sustained. This caused him to miss 8 games over a 3-year span. And that may not seem like a lot, but ever since he got that massive deal, this is attributed to his play kind of deteriorating and not being up to the standards of what he's being paid for by the 49ers. In 2023, when the San Francisco 49ers made the Super Bowl, he showed flashes. I mean, against my Eagles, he actually had a hat-trick of touchdowns, and we thought, wow, if this is the Deebo Samuel that the 49ers are going to get with Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, well, this is an elite unit, and they came just so close to winning it all last season, but unfortunately lost in overtime to the Kansas City Chiefs. And coming into 2024, the San Francisco 49ers needed Deebo Samuel to step up. They were already missing Brandon Ayuk for much of the year as he missed most of the season with a knee injury. Ricky Parasol was out for the beginning part of the year due to getting shot in the chest. And we know about Christian McCaffrey. He was always in and out of the lineup, missed the earlier chunk of the season, came back, didn't quite look like himself, and ended up missing the remainder of the 2024 season. So really, it was up to Deebo Samuel to keep the offense afloat. Obviously, they had George Kittle, but as a tight end, you'll have limited options. But yet again, Deebo Samuel had opportunities, but failed to live up to his massive contract number. And it got so bad to the point where the struggles being community noted by Twitter. We know all about the fact-checking that's out there in social media, but just to see that Twitter had fact-checked Deebo about his struggles in the 2024 season was just hilarious. Even they cited that he was leading the 49ers in drops at the time of his tweet. Obviously, that came in a week where he saw fewer targets than ever and complained about it during the week. On a short week against the LA Rams, on Thursday Night Football, he had a golden opportunity on a slant route to catch the ball, do something with it, at a minimum get a first down, if not score, and simply dropped it. The boos rained down at Levi Stadium, and basically that changed the tide in that game where the 49ers ended up losing that and eventually getting knocked out of the playoffs entirely. The Super Bowl hangover was very real. The 49ers were decimated from top to bottom, and Deebo Samuel was one of the few healthy pieces of that team. But like I said, he failed to live up to expectations, and I think now it's really coming down to him getting a fresh start. Deebo is going to be a free agent in 2026, and maybe a change of scenery. He's going to be motivated. He's going to be productive. But I don't think the Washington Commanders are a Deebo Samuel move away from catching the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw in those 3 matchups, for the most part, if Jalen Hurts is healthy, the Commanders do not belong in the same field as the Philadelphia Eagles. I like the up-and-coming story, but remember, the Commanders played a 4th place schedule. They won a lot of games that came down to the wire, and if things go a different way, they arguably could have been, instead of 12-5, they could have been a 9-8 type of ball club. But instead, things landed their way, And now with elevated competition heading into 2025, the Eagles have already made some moves to defend their championship crown. It's still going to mean that the Commanders have to make some moves. I like Bron, but he's set to be a free agent this offseason, so unless they either re-sign him or draft his replacement in April's draft, I don't think Deebo Samuel can be the number 2 receiver on a championship winning team. I think obviously the passing offense flows through Terry McLaurin, but you're going to need another receiver because even with San Francisco, he fell in the hierarchy of 49ers weapons when you obviously have Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and then eventually Brandon Ayuk. The Los Angeles Lakers are riding a 6-game win streak and are surging to the 2nd seed in the Western Conference standings as Luka Doncic is getting better and better each game with his new team. I'm here to break down the Lakers' recent surge as it's been very impressive, especially in recent weeks with not only with the Lakers having a harder schedule, but also just seeing the vast improvements with not just Doncic, but as an entire team overall. Starting off with Luka Doncic, obviously since the trade, it's been a very interesting month in February. He started off the month as a Dallas Maverick, recovering from the calf injury, but then after recently buying a house, his GM Nico Harrison sends him packing to Los Angeles to become a LA Laker, and his life is flipped upside down. We cover that trade. I'll link that reaction in the description. It just took a little bit of time for Doncic to really get into the groove, absorbing the news that he received in the waking hours on a Saturday night into a Sunday morning 3 weeks ago, and also recovering from this injury. Like I said, a calf injury is nothing to really overlook because we've seen it derail many players and even lead to more serious injuries. But as he's slowly getting into the groove, not only is he trusting his body, but he's also trusting his Lakers teammates. He had his best performance a couple weekends ago against the Denver Nuggets, putting up over 32 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists, and that was by far his most efficient night as a Laker. Just later that week, Doncic faces his former team, the Dallas Mavericks, as his former GM Nico Harrison demanded send him packing from Dallas in the early morning hours on a Sunday morning to the Los Angeles Lakers for the first time. Every time Luka had made a basket, he looked over and stared at the bench. Definitely had a lot of tension, not really directed at maybe the Mavs players, as he's still quite friendly with several members, including his former backcourt mate in Kyrie Irving. It's definitely directed at the Mavs organization. It rattled him early on. I think just being such a life-changing move, like I said, in the middle of the night, was something that not many people could really get acclimated to in such a quick amount of time. But in this matchup against the Dallas Mavericks, he started off hot, he was aggressive, really getting into the paint, was finally showing signs of the old Luka Doncic that we used to see back in Dallas. While the efficiency hasn't been the greatest, especially in that matchup against Dallas, he still put up a triple-double. Bron did his thing. He closed out the game, and the Lakers won that matchup last week. They pick up a win against the Minnesota Timberwolves and then face Luka's nemesis in the LA Clippers for 2 matchups against their crosstown rivals in 3 days. And in both matchups, Luka Doncic put on a string of productive games where he combined over 2-game span of 60 points. And I thought this was definitely his best stretch as a Laker. I'm seeing not only just the aggression, but also just the jump shot be more fluid. There's a lot of confidence with it. He's getting into the paint. And one thing that we're seeing consistently throughout this run with the Lakers is that he's getting to the line. I know that the shooting splits isn't the greatest. It's 39, 27, and 75. Definitely way off Luka's high standards that we've seen in the past. But there's definitely effort there, not only just offensively, but even defensively, something which I'll get into a little bit later. But I'm definitely seeing an impact with Luka Doncic's play. It's only a matter of time when the efficiency starts to get better. But if you just look at him being aggressive offensively, he's setting up guys all over the court, whether it's Austin Reeves or Jackson Hayes, who's feasting for dunks left and right as a lob threat. And even LeBron James, as the two have been really being his turn, my turn, but it just works so fluidly. I'm seeing LeBron being somewhat rejuvenated, especially in this recent stretch with Luka in the lineup, where he's getting clean looks at the rim for dunks and just getting wide open three-pointers. But to discuss this entire team's impact, the ironic aspect of this recent surge is the defense has been phenomenal. Since the trade in early February, the Lakers are now the second best rated defense in the entire NBA. A team as a whole being so good defensively. You think with losing one of the best defensive anchors in Anthony Davis that the defense would drop off. We know that Luka Doncic is definitely a target amongst many opposing teams, as he's been dubbed the traffic cone. He's not really adept at the defensive end, but still, I'm seeing him get into passing lanes for deflections. He's averaging almost a block a game. It really just comes down to effort. I mean, I think what we're seeing is also a rejuvenated LeBron James. Ever since LeBron has turned 40, he has channeled back his Miami Heat days, especially in 2013 when he went on a dominant run as part of the Heatles' 27-game win streak en route to back-to-back titles. And for LeBron, what more can we say? I mean, this is yet another thing that he's doing at age 40 at this point. He's yet again found the fountain of youth. And in this recent run, especially in February, I mean, he's averaging 29 points a game, 10 rebounds on 55.5% shooting, and over 44% from deep. I mean, that is uncanny for somebody at age 40, but also just doing this for so long. But yet again, LeBron is surprising us yet again. We're seeing great efforts on the defensive side, especially with the chase down blocks. It's re-energized LeBron at this point. Just Luka's impact, it's really changed what we think the Lakers could do. Before, with Anthony Davis, they were pretty good. Top four is something we haven't seen this Lakers team do, with the exception of the bubble year. They've been a play-in team with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but with Luka now, they've surged up to the second spot in the Western Conference. It's very tight and logjam. But the funny thing is, with this recent surge, is they still sit over 10 games behind the OKC Thunder, who I really do want to cover on this channel at some point. They just have such a dominant run in the last couple of years, but this year especially, it just seems that they're just primed for the title. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is having a phenomenal year, should win MVP if everything goes to plan, especially in the final 6 weeks of the season. But I think that OKC having this large a gap is definitely interesting to see, and we'll see what happens in the postseason. But right now, it's them and the rest of the West, but who knows who could join them in the Western Conference Finals. I think it would be the Lakers' best interest to avoid them until a potential Western Conference Finals trip. But getting back to the Lakers, it's not just LeBron and Luka who are getting involved in this. Austin Reeves, since the trade, has picked it up as well. And obviously he's benefiting from wide open looks that Luka is setting up for him. It's also just him being aggressive, just like the rest of the LA squad, but him taking that extra step. He's sometimes the second best offensive player, because we know that Luka's still integrating himself as he's coming off of a calf injury, but Austin Reeves has really turned it up a notch in this year for the Los Angeles Lakers. If you look at the entire team, it's not just Reeves, it's not just LeBron, it's not just Luka. I'm seeing Rui Hachimura be benefiting from this recent addition of Luka Doncic, but even before Luka got here, Rui has had a really good year, especially as a spot-up catch-and-shoot kind of guy. Dorian Finney-Smith, who was another mid-season acquisition from the Brooklyn Nets, as he's been another good wing defender, something that the perimeter defense has improved so much, and I think Dorian Finney-Smith has had a massive impact and factor into that revamping of the defensive side. But as long as he's knocking down the open shots, I mean, that's really all you can ask from a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. And finally, I think Dalton Knecht, the guy that was actually casted off by the Lakers front office, and yeah, he could have pouted, he could have just said, I'm not reporting, whatever have you, but he's been able to bury the hatchet and actually has been really productive since that failed trade when he was originally traded to the Charlotte Hornets for Mark Williams. So far, these changes in the Lakers have already proved big dividends. Like I said, they've surged up the Western Conference standings. They have now this ceiling of being kind of a Western Conference Finals contender at this point. I still need to see a lot more as they have a big week coming up with teams like the New York Knicks and Boston Celtics as they head over to Boston. But this could be something where we're seeing the Lakers take a few strides forward as they're still figuring this out on the fly. But again, credit to JJ Redick for handling all this. I think he did a really good job during the All-Star break to really reset, recalibrate, and really figure out where to put his guys in situations for success. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment on what you think the Lakers' ceiling is for this year. Could they make it all the way up to the Western Conference Finals? And do they stand a chance against the OKC Thunder if they were to meet them in such a matchup? So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Remember to be on the lookout for future episodes as the NFL offseason is heating up. But don't forget to drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to get clips from today's episode, we got that for you here on YouTube and our various playlists, as well as on TikTok for now. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio perspective, we got that for you as well. I'll link everything in the description. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Shout out to Joy for editing this podcast, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care, everybody.